Inflation, caused by the policy of the Menzies government, has more than doubled the cost of living. Prices and profits rise unchecked. In 1953, Australian and overseas shipping companies alone disclosed profits of more than £53 million, but wages and margins stay frozen. Exhausted, Waterside workers throughout Australia strike for wage justice. Sydney's Town Hall cannot hold the thousands that flock to the public meeting called by the Sydney branch to place the facts of the dispute before the public. Mr. Monk, ACTU President, was greeted with applause by one of the largest meetings ever held in the Sydney Town Hall when he reported that the Council of Trade Unions endorsed the action of the Waterside Workers Federation. Mr. Eddie Ward, Labour Member of Parliament, supports the Wharfies case. He assured the meeting that the Labour Party would fight for wage justice for the trade unions and that this struggle in particular would receive their full support. Mr. Jim Healy, National Secretary of the Waterside Workers Federation, replied to press charges that the strike was an attempt to smash the arbitration court. He pointed out that the tyrannical attitude of the arbitration system would bring about its own destruction. Mr. Healy said that the strong support from the entire trade union movement clearly showed the justice of the Wharfies' claims. Matt Munro, Vigilance Officer of the Sydney branch, puts the union's case, explains that a breakthrough by the Watersiders on the wage front will make it easier for all other workers, iron workers, railmen, members of the Australian Workers' Union, and thousands more to win urgently needed wage adjustments. At the Downing Street depot, a meeting of tramway men resolved to support the strike after hearing Alan Doherty outline the union's case. Trammies at this depot waiting £32 to the strike fund. St Mary's, listening to well-known Wharfie speaker Stan Moran, are employees of the American Utah Construction Company. Here the Menzies government is building a £23 million munitions factory. Shift workers coming and going eagerly sought and read the leaflets handed out for the Wharfies. Jack Hartley, another of the many Wharfie speakers in this well-planned publicity drive, essential part of the strike campaign to put the real facts before the people. At Port Kembla, publicity again takes high priority in the growing campaign. On the railway platforms at the heavy industry shift change, Secretary Bill Harkness and Strike Committee man Jack Wool speak to hundreds of steelworkers. Despite the rain, speakers held a record number of meetings. A unique sidelight from Port Kembla branch. At Wollongong, in one of the biggest mass contributions ever organised by the Red Cross, members of this branch became blood donors and did their bit for a worthy cause. There were many volunteers, and a roster system had to be worked out to fit them all in. This blood will later be grouped and will become a valuable asset in the Red Cross blood bank. Strikers' wives hear reports from other members of the miners, and many others had promised to give their moral and financial backing and to lend their weight to the strikers' demand for wage. High-pressure work involving 8 committees keeps the members busy. Strike committee, publicity, ticket, welfare, entertainment, finance and women's committees. Despite ship owners' determined attempts to discredit the Watersiders, public response to their cause was generous and practical. They gave donations of money and food to see to the immediate needs of the strikers and their families. In Melbourne, as in all other ports, the womenfolk played an important part, especially in this welfare work, and stood alongside their menfolk every day of the strike. Faced every week with growing bills and a shrinking pay packet, the Wharfies' wives know full well the justice of the union's claims. They saw there was a job to be done, and they did it. Unusual sidelight from Melbourne Branch. In realist theatre, members of the branch formed themselves into a group, learnt how to screen films, and showed the films made by their own union to more than 8,000 people during the strike, an important part of the publicity drive. Newcastle Watersiders turned their hand to butchering meat for the members. This meat was donated and sold to the committee at cost price by local butchers. Continuous and increasing support from the public made it possible for the Newcastle branch to give particular attention to the welfare needs of its members. The Women's Committee is well to the fore again, showing their growing awareness and practical assistance in trade union activity. Like every other housewife, Wharfies' wives have been hard hit by high prices and frozen wages. They come to help because they are convinced that the struggle their men are involved in is a just one. Helping to decide policy in the Welfare Committee, the Newcastle women give Bernie Sullivan some good advice on food allocation. These experiences of the Women Folk in Strike organisation will serve the union well in future struggles.
With the full support and best wishes of the Barbers' Union, versatile members of the Sydney branch set up shop in the union rooms and got busy with scissors and clippers. No casualties were reported, and this customer seems well pleased with the result. The large Sydney Welfare Committee, led by Vice Presidents Norm Woodley and Communist Alderman Ron Maxwell, discussed ways to relieve the financial worries of the members. This group interviewed gas companies, electricity authorities and hire purchase firms, asked for temporary concessions and were successful in obtaining them. Members came in from all suburbs of Sydney on Fridays, distribution day for the Welfare Committee. Care was taken to see that the food allocation contained a good balance of food requirements. Dozens of Women's Committee members helped give out fruit, vegetables, butter, sugar, eggs, tea and cereals. As the strike developed, welfare groups appeared in the suburbs, rallied behind the Waterside workers and generously assisted this important welfare work.
Here's Neville Isaacson of the Publicity Committee explain the issues. Crowded meetings like this one, bringing full support from the entire trade union movement, were the result of the union's impressive campaigns in all branches. Hundreds of rank and file speakers addressed scores of meetings every day of the strike. This tremendous activity, with its great unity and enthusiasm, brought the struggle close to victory. Then suddenly, the Australian Council of Trade Unions, which had pledged full support for the strike, withdrew its support. A decision which shocked the labour movement and was later refused endorsement by the trades and labour councils. The Waterside Workers Federal Council met and unanimously rejected the ACTU proposals. Mr. Healy said that these proposals meant that the ACTU had forsaken the struggle. Further, it had sacrificed the united support of the very trade unionists it claimed to represent. representatives from all states stressed the urgent need to convince the ACTU executive of this nationwide solidarity. They emphasized their readiness to fight on and to preserve unity. But despite the protests which followed, the ACTU turned a deaf ear. Realizing the supreme need for unity, so that the struggle for wage justice could continue from a position of strength, the Federal Council of the Union recommended a return to work. Mass meetings were called in all states to discuss the recommendation. Typical of the meetings held in an atmosphere of democratic debate was the Melbourne Branch meeting addressed by Councillors Curly Rook and Ted Bull, where members unanimously decided to return to work. Remains the spearhead of the campaign for all other workers and is still supported by the trade union movement. The future of wage justice is dependent on courage, unity and action. The support of the Australian Council of Trade Unions must be added to this. And in this spirit, workers face the future struggle for higher margins and better all-round conditions on the Australian waterfront.